Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, it's Tsuki. Continuing in my small and simple, humble music playlist, I opened this application called Maestro, and you have some others music applications that do the same thing, such as Music Score, that is basically allow us to use the formal composition of music. Why I'm using this? Just to show you some parts that I wouldn't be able to show in the Beepbox Slarmoo box. Alright, so let's start with the basic thing. Here in the Maestro, you can use that gear to handle your music file. Alright, so if you touch the music title, that symbol in the left called in the allegretto or one of the steps, you are able to set certain things. So if I touch the untitled, I am able to set the file name, the title, the subtitle, the author, my name, the tempo, the time signature. As I said, so the same thing in the Slarmoo box. If you change the tempo, you should as well check if the correct note length is selected and the time signature as well. Here in the bottom, you're able to handle the instruments. So if I click add staff, I'm able to add a new instrument. Here in the trash, I am able to delete it. So what is the configuration of the instruments? So we have the instrument itself, so by default is the acoustic grand piano. Here is the clefs. So what is clefs? As I said, staffs is 5 horizontal lines that we use to write the music on music sheets. In the beginning of the staff, or even in the middle, depending the composition, you have the clef that basically says how that clef is organized, and by default as well the roll. Remember that I talked about the registers and I said talked about the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and so on. Usually for instruments you have only the 3 in the left and the percussion 1. Alright, so we have the treble, that is that most used symbol to refer to music. We have the bass and the baritone. I will explain the difference later, but basically it's the role of that instrument and the note order, and the drums or for the percussion. As I said, for human voice it's more specific, so you have the mezzo soprano, the mezzo tenor, and so on. We have the octave, the default octave of that instrument. We have the transpose. Remember that I said that transposition is basically related to the octave. So if you move 1 octave higher, you are transposing 1 octave. This is where you set your key signature plus the scale. This is typically related to circle of fifths, that I won't explain the whole theory behind it, but basically we are able to lay down our keys plus the scales inside of the clock type of disposition order, and they are and we can figure out which notes and scales are related to each other and their relatives. So we start in the middle, like in the 12 of or 1 of a clock, that is the number in the upper part in the C major, and the more we go in the clockwise up to the 7th, we add sharps. So if we add 1 sharp, we go to the G major. If we add 2 sharps, we go to D major, and so on up to C sharp. And if we move counterclockwise, we add flats. So we go to F, to B flat, to E flat, and so on, up to C flat. And this circle of fifths as well have the relative minor of them. That is the second part. So as you can see, it is, for example, a key, comma, another key. This is the relative key until in a different scale. So for C major, the relative minor is A minor. All right. In that play, pause, and etc., we have the possibility to play our songs or play a certain part of it. All right. And in the number 2, we have the note length. As I said, this is related. This is relative to the bar length. All right. So we have that O, or that circle, that is basically saying that one note will be held a whole bar. The next one, that is a circle with a pole, is actually called a stem. It's half of the previous note. Basically, this is how it works. So each next note length is basically half long as the previous one. So this is a half note. The next one, that is a full circle with that stem, is 1/4. The next one, that is that full circle with a stem and a tail, is 1/8. The next 1/16. The next 1/32. And personally, I never used anything lower than this. Usually this very short note is when you have a specific time signature, or you are a percussionist, basically. All right. We have the rest because playing a note is an action. Not playing a note is an action as well, and it's basically following the same principle of the note length. So the rectangle pointing down is a whole rest. A rectangle pointing upwards is half rest. This kind of a tilt in a vertical is 1/4 rest. The next is a pull with a, I don't know, a small circle linked to it, is 1/8 rest. The next is 1/16 rest, next 32nd, and so on. If in your music you have a time signature, for example, in this case by default is 4/4, it says, as I said, each bar is 4 beats long. It basically means if the sum up time of the notes in the rest sum up to 4 beats, so we have to add a bar because we basically ended that small section. All right, and you are able to change these things throughout the music. So you are able to change the key signature, the time measurement of a music throughout it is occurring. All right, you also have some repeats, bars, and so on. Before I continue, I wanted to show you something that is related to the steps. As I said, the steps is these 5 horizontal lines that we write our music, and there is 3 main clefs for the music notation. So I will add 3 different instruments in here. So I will touch the title. I will add the more grand pianos, why not? But now I will change the clef. So the next one will be the bass, and the last one will be the baritone. So over online, or in the space between them, I am actually referring to the actual note. Since I have the key signature, actually each space is related to the note in that scale. All right, so for example, the treble clef basically it starts in the lowest line is actually E. Well, since we have 9 space because it's 5 from each line and the space between them, that is 4, and since octaves is basically 8, it's basically the next note of our first one. So here, in the treble, the first line or the bottom line is E. And the highest line is F, because it's E is the next key of E. But you are able to get out of this, you have to go higher and higher and higher. So if you select a note, you are able to manipulate, and you are able to go lower or higher, but you have to go higher for a really extensive period of time. It is actually recommended to note that actually in that octave you will go one octave up or down. All right, the bass starts in G and ends in A. And the baritone, note that sometimes that clef is often omitted. So if you have a staff that the clef is omitted, probably it is related to the baritone. I don't use that often, but I know that the highest line is C, so the bottom line is B. So now we have the ways that each note relates to the next one. So we have the first one, that is the dot. So you might stumble out there, actually a note with a dot next to it. Basically each dot says that this note will actually be played longer, and for each dot basically adds the next note length. So for example, since this full circle with a stem is 1/4, this dot basically says this will last the next note longer, so 1/8. If I place 2 dots, basically this will add the next note length, that is 1/16. So the actual note length of this 1/4 is 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16. If you have 1/8 notes or shorter than this, you are able to connect them to set the general rhythm with beams. So for example, this is 2 1/8, so I'm able to use this to connect this one. When you play different notes in different pitches, you are able to say you are able to note that this note should be played or switched smoothly. So you use a slur, that is this curved line. You are able to sum different note length to modify it as you want. So for example, if you want that one note should be held for 2 bars, for example, you add one full note, the bar, the next full note, and tie them with this line. So now this basically says this note will be held for 2 whole bars. And as you might concluded, the dot note length is basically a simplification of these two different notes with this tie. We have the glissando, but that is basically you have the origin of a note that is the current note and the next note you want to play, so you play every single note between them. We have this duplet that basically says that two notes will be actually play as the length of 3. We have the triplet that basically says the opposite. 3 notes will be played in the sum of 2 notes. And we have the ghost note. It's usually when you play one soft note to highlight the next one. We have the articulations. So this dot in the middle of a note is the staccato, basically saying that this note should be held shorter than it is written. So usually 70 to 75% of the length. We have this accent that it says that that note will be played stronger or it will have more emphasis. We have the tenuto that is basically saying that the note will be played longer than is written. The same idea of the staccato but in the opposite. We have the fermata that basically says that note should be played longer. The tenuto is slightly longer and fermata usually is longer than is written, usually 1.5 times of that note. We have the trill that when you play adjacent or notes that is close to that one. We have this note with these 3 bars, that is the tremolo when you play a certain note rapidly. We have the arpeggio that basically you're playing notes of a chord in a staccato, so you play one note at a time, very short, and you basically play them in a certain sequence. And we have the grace note or acciaccatura, that is when you play a note before the next word to emphasize the next note. These articulations is basically like special effects or techniques of playing a certain note, and usually is up to the musician. So if you, for example, use the fermata, even though I said usually it stays 1.5 longer than is written, maybe some musician actually will wait longer or play longer or play a little bit shorter than the next one. So actually this kinda is up to the instrumentist. We have the accidentals, and as I said, this is mostly related to motion, right? When you have a note, for example, in this case C, remember that the next note in a piano roll is C sharp. So how can I reach this C? Using accidentals. So the sharp will basically say that this and the next note will be played one key upper than it is written. So this will become C sharp, as you can see here in the middle. The next notes in that space will be written or noted as one key higher. The same idea with flat. So if I place this note on D and use a flat, basically every single note I place in this space will be played one key lower. And to go back to the normal sound of that key, I should use this diamond that is the natural. So from that note on, we go back to normal. We have this double flat and double sharp, that is, well, since one sharp and one flat is half a step or one key, The doubles is 2, alright? We have the demi-flat and demi-sharp. Remember that I said in the Western music we divide the notes in 12, but the Eastern music actually you have way more tones between the an octave within an octave. These you are able to reach them with these demi-flats or demi-sharps. That is called microtones as well. And we have the key signature change. Lastly, we have the volume of that note. We go from pianissimo is very low to pianissimo that is very low, piano that is low, mezzo piano that is a bit low. We have mezzo forte that is a bit loud. We have forte that is loud, fortissimo that is very loud, and fortissimo that is very loud. And we might stumble in things that is not available in here in this software, in this application. For example, we don't have pizzicato, that is a technical way to play something, usually string instruments. We also do not have sforzando, that is a type of accent but a little bit different, and so on. So usually I do not use this application, neither MusiScore and so on, to make my music. Usually I make music using Slarmoo's box, but sometimes I study using this in order to become a better composer. Alright, let's just continue certain terms such as the texture, and texture actually is related to two things. The first is the combination of sounds. So for example, if you have only one line of music being played at the same time, this is monophonic. You have more than one thing at the same time, the same thing is homophonic, and if you play at the same time different things is polyphonic. But texture can be related as well to different instruments being played at the same time. We have the counterpoint. Well, usually even though we have chords, usually instruments are basically independent from each other. If you always play music instruments playing the same note or notes that is related at the same time, in the same pace, in the same way, you might actually have music that is kind of hollow, like bland. So ideally each instrument, unless it's like assigned to do the same thing, they should do different things. And this is the concept of voice leading. So when instruments playing different lines in different ways, different motions, different speeds, in order to make the music sound more rich. That is some like mixed terms that I will explain because I just remember and noted them. Alright, so we have the ostinato. Ostinato is when a sequence of notes is being played over and over and over and over. For example, if you think of Megalovania, for example, that dun 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 dun, it's playing over and over and over and over and over. This is ostinato. We have the ornaments, that is how you play some notes. Is deeply related to articulations. Alright, we have the forms. Well, we usually, right, in music, we refer to a group of bars as sections. Alright, in music usually use these groups or these sections in certain order. Alright, because as I said, us humans like patterns and predictable things. That's why we use a lot of our home note or our center tone, because we like this. And when we display or we arrange or actually we order our music in using these forms and sections and the order we place them, we keep these things predictable. So for example, you have the minueto form, A section, B section, A section. We have the rondo form, that is a section, then a different one, then the first one. So you have A, B, A, C, A, D, all basically all alternating with a home section, let me put it this way, and so on. To be honest, I the main I really miss this point. Usually most part of my music, after I try to study in a more classical way, was totally wrong because I never came back to the home section. This is my main fault, alright? So I recommend you to not miss this. We have the orchestration. It's basically when you have different instruments and you group them together to sound and to create a certain texture, alright? We have the doubling. So as I said, the counterpoint is when different instruments making different voices moves in a different ways, alright, or have different characteristics. Doubling is basically when you have one voice and you want to just reinforce this. So usually you have two different instruments playing the same thing, not necessarily in the same octave, but usually is playing the same thing. So for example, you have a violin, for example, and it can be double in the viola, alright? Now, the motif, that is the term that I most struggled with. Well, motif is defined as short or simple music idea, basic music idea. To explain this, is basically this. This is mostly used in classical music, but I will try to have the general idea. So when we play something over and over and over, our ears might get tired. So it is a good idea to make different things. But if we don't keep some identity of that thing, of this music changing, actually our listener might get lost. So the idea behind a motif is have a basic idea that sounds good enough, and we are able to reduce our music to it. And even though we do whatever we want with our music, it is in certain level traced back to the motif, right? So usually the motif handling have sort of terms related to it. Using a motif, we are actually able to get different things, such as from the motif we are able to get a theme. So a theme is basically a melodic idea using a motif. We have as well a subject, that is a more complete idea, melody from a motif. And we have the leitmotif, that is when a certain sounding pattern is related to something. So remember when you, for example, used to watch, I don't know, iCarly or Victorious, when they will show, for example, a certain scene in the school or in the house or in the bedroom of someone, for example, they play a certain thing. So that certain thing is a leitmotif, when some part of music is related to a certain thing, such as location or character and so on. Mostly used on operas, but actually you are able to use it in the normal music composition as well. And some sections are able to have different roles, let me put it this way. So we have the exposition, usually when you have the motif and you do something to show the first idea of it. We have the development, so when this motif is transformed. Recapitulation, when the exposition idea come back, and we have the coda, or the conclusion of a piece, usually final form. To be honest, it's kind of an outro idea, right? And we have the transition between two different sections, often called as bridge or transition section, all right? Usually for contrast. So we might actually stumble in these terminologies, sections such as intro, verse 1, the chorus, verse 2, and outro, all right? So as I said, I usually don't use this to compose my melodies. My music. To be honest, I rather start in Slarmoo's box, have a good sounding music there, and then writing this file, the music sheet. All right, but actually, it's up to you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.